Hi, welcome to Board Gems. In this video series, I cover older board game gems, review them for you, and so you can find out if this older type of game might be a game that you're interested in. Games have changed a lot over the last, well, forever. But even if you look back 20 years, the board games are very, very different. And the board game I want to cover for this video is, let's see, I think it originally came out 2006. It was originally published by Kosmos, and it's The Pillars of the Earth from Ken Follett, who is not the designer. This is a novel. It's not a novel I'm familiar with. It's possible this novel was very popular in Germany, and so Kosmos licensed the IP from Ken Follett. And Ken Follett's got a little blurb on the back saying, you know, this game is great. I have played it. My family and I all love playing this game. But the designers are on the box right here from Rieneck and Stefan Stadler. Now, Stadler, I'm not really familiar with. I think he pretty much exclusively works with Rieneck. You usually don't see... I can't think of a Stadler solo design off the top of my head, but I know he's worked with Rieneck on a number of other designs. And Michael Rieneck is a designer who often works with Kosmos and seems to have a knack for developing games based on a particular IP. So he's done Around the World in 80 Days, which the 2004 edition, which is one I plan to cover in the future. Dracula, a two-player game, the Kosmos two-player line, that's been requested for the channel. I do not yet have a copy. And Witch of Salem, which is another novel. That's a German language novel. So I don't think that's a novel that many people in the English-speaking world are familiar with. But anyway, Kosmos licensed that IP, and Rieneck designed the game. Pillars of the Earth is for 2 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, and takes 90 to 120 minutes. That's actually pretty fair. A lot of times when a game says 120 minutes, I stay away because it's very easy for the game to take bloody 3 hours or something. They're very optimistic when they say when they print a time on the box, right? They say, I need to 120 minutes. Well, it's more like 150 to 180 minutes. This one, no. A 2-player game, you can probably play, even like inexperienced players, 2 people could bang out a game in 90 minutes. And 4 people, yeah, you're looking at 2 hours plus. I'm not familiar with the novel, but I am a little bit familiar with the video game. There is a computer and console game about the Pillars of the Earth. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure style of game. Quite good, and so I am familiar with some of the characters like Tom Builder that make cameos in this game. So this came out originally 2006, and it was quite the hit at that Essen. I want to set the stage for Pillars of the Earth. So I want to take you back to 2006.
A strong, stable, national, majority conservative government.
At this time, there were worker placement games, but worker placement as a genre didn't really exist. You'd have one-off games that have this kind of interesting mechanism, like Bus, a game that I will probably cover at some point. Often it takes one kind of big game, one game that really takes the hobby world by storm, and then kind of solidifies the idea amongst other designers and maybe amateur designers who then become designers professionally, that this is a great idea and it's one more tool that a designer can add to their toolbox to make more games. Because now worker placement is insanely popular, insanely common. It's all over the place. 2006, that wasn't the case. It was the year before. It was Caylus in 2005. And that game was the first worker placement game that really got people's attention. But it was a long game, relatively complicated game. And so there was kind of this push a little bit. It sometimes takes a while to get going, but it's like, oh, what if there was Caylus, but it was a little bit more family friendly? And so 2006, we see Pillars of the Earth. And that's exactly what it felt like to a lot of people. A lighter version of Caylus. Still a bit long, 90 to 120 minutes, but shorter than Caylus. A little bit involved, but still less involved than Caylus. And so this is a game that, I could introduce to my family of gamers, right? I've already introduced them to some kind of more involved games, and here's Pillars of the Earth. They can easily pick it up. And so it was pretty popular. Such that in 2008, we see an expansion, and the expansion ups the player count to 6 players, adds a little bit more variety, which the game desperately needs. We'll talk about that more after the teach. Another release in 2008 was Stone Age. And Stone Age was worker placement, and it was lighter again than Pillars of the Earth, and shorter again than Pillars of the Earth. So looking back now, Pillars of the Earth kind of sits in this weird in-between, where you have the really involved game of Caylus, you have a more family-friendly worker placement game in Stone Age, and Pillars of the Earth was kind of caught in between. But was it 2008? It was around that time anyway, that of course Agricola came out. Agricola was huge, and that really put worker placement as a mechanism on the map. I'll show you how to play, just the base game, then I'll talk about why it's a gem, we'll talk about the expansion as well. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. Take the 3 resource types, there's wood, stone, and sand, and just place them in the forest quarry and gravel pit, respectively. There is a 4th resource type called metal. Just leave that off to the side of the board around this area. These are the event cards. You want to shuffle those up and place near the board, near the events kind of scroll icon here. These are called privilege cards. 2 of them have this little extra flourish on them. You're going to have those on the bottom of the stack, and you're going to shuffle the rest and add 10 on top of that for a total of 12, and put those off to the side. There's 6 rounds to the game, and each round 4 craftsmen will come out. And the craftsmen are numbered 1 through 6. 4 craftsmen per round. You're going to take the 6s, mix those up, put those at the bottom of the stack, then do the same for the 5s, the 4s, the 3s, the 2s, and the 1s. So you'll have a stack like this. You can put that maybe around here somewhere. Also have this is the tax die. Leave that nearby. As well as these wooden pieces. These are round markers and also starting player markers. You'll see how that works. Assign each player a color. Each player will get double-sided player aid, 3 starting craftsmen, and you'll see with the craftsmen, they show the 3 different resource types here, and a conversion rate of those into, well, some of them will be money, but these ones are into victory points. This kind of arch symbol is victory points. So this woodworker, for example, allows you to convert 2 wood cubes into 1 victory point, and you can do that 4 times in a single round. See the 4 times inside the arrow there. Each of these has an exclamation mark. At any one time, you can only have at most 5 craftsmen. So when you get a 6th, you'll have to discard one. These exclamation marks are a reminder that if you discard one of these, you will lose some small ability. The player will take their 3 craftsmen and put them face up in front of them. Players also will get 3 pawns. These are the master builders, as well as a number of workers. This big one is worth 5, so in total you have 12 workers. Pillars of the Earth is a worker placement game, so the terminology might get a bit confusing because these are the workers, but you don't place them like you would in a worker placement game. It's actually these pawns that get placed. So I'm going to refer to these as laborers because they go into the forest, the quarry, and the gravel pit to gain you resources. Anyway, you're going to take all those and put them in front of you. And each player also gets 2 discs. One will start on the 2 for victory points. There's a little flag here. This track is for victory points. And this one is for money. This track at the bottom here shows how much money you have. At this point, you may want to determine a start player. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game with these 3 colors. Mix them up. And the first player would go on the 20 to show they start with 20 gold, and then 21, and then 22. it goes clockwise from there. Give the start player one of the 6 wooden pieces. That shows that they are the start player, and at the end of the round they will get to place this on the foundation here. And over the course of the game, the 6 rounds, this cathedral will be built up. And you're ready to begin. At the start of every round, you're going to take this black disc and place it on this circle next to the 7. Place an event card face down here. Draw the top 2 privilege cards and place them in these spaces here. Different privilege cards have different times in which they execute. Some of them show 1 times. If you get this card, you get to hang on to it and choose when to use it, then it goes out of the game. The infinity symbol means they have a benefit throughout the rest of the game. And the sort of lightning bolt arrow means that as soon as they get this card, they immediately execute it, and then the card goes away. You're going to take the 4 craftsmen for the round. This is round 1, so we take the round 1 craftsman. You've already mixed them up. Place 2 on these spaces here, and the other 2 below the board. You'll see these 2 notches here. These are sort of the laborer cards. They show a number of laborers and a location and resource that they can be assigned to. There's 9 of them. Every round you shuffle these up and lay out 7 on the bottom of the board. There'll be 2 left over. Just put those to the side. At the start of the next round, you can shuffle those back in. In the cloth bag, add everybody's master builders. At the start of every round, this market should be full. Each of these gray spaces should have 1 stone. Each of these dark brown spaces should have a wood. And each of these beige spaces should have 1 sand. There is actually a space for metal, but you don't add metal here. You can add a metal to this space as a reminder, and I will explain what all the different areas do. You have 4 gray neutral laborers. Place 2 in the Shiring Castle up here. Leave the other 2 nearby. And you're ready to start the round. What first happens in the round is players will take turns drafting these cards at the bottom of the board. The laborer cards are free. These 2 craftsmen have a cost. And you'll see the cost is on the corner there. So this new woodworker costs 3 coins. If you take a craftsman, you pay the cost by moving your marker that many spaces down, and then take that card and put it in front of you. You can only have 5. So if you already have 5 and you get a new one, you have to choose one to discard. If you take one of these laborer cards, it's free. You take the card and you put that many of your laborers into that location. In this case, 8. So yellow, for example, would put there 5 and 2 3s. Later in the round, this player will get 3 stone from the quarry. And players will keep taking turns drafting one of these cards or passing. The phase ends when everyone has passed. And any laborers you have left over that were not assigned, you put them over here in the wool mill, and they'll gain a little bit of gold for you. So that's the first part of the round. Now comes the main part, is the worker placement part. All the players' workers, master builders in this game, are added to a single bag and mixed up, and the start player draws one at random. Once during this phase, the start player who's drawing the pawns can choose to cancel a draw. They look at the pawn, they say, I don't like that, they put it back, mix it up, draw a new one. If it's the same color, they have to live with that. They can only do that once this whole phase. So let's say yellow, being the start player, drew this red, place the red pawn here. Red now has a choice to make. This number is how expensive it is to place this master builder onto the board. Red can choose to pay the 7 gold, from 21 down to 14, take the pawn and place it on any of these round spaces, like that. Or they can pass. They can choose not to pay that money, and they don't put that pawn down now. They'll put it down later for free. Let's say red passes, but regardless of what happens, this marker will go down. Usually put the pawn there to show that it passed. And the next pawn, whatever the next pawn is that's drawn, it's red again. This owner would then make a new choice. Pay 6 to place this one or pass. Let's say red thinks that's still a little too expensive. Let's keep drawing. This time it's blue. Does blue want to spend the money to put down their worker? Let's say maybe they don't. So again they pass. But now, as you can see, it's starting to get cheaper. Here's blue again. But this time, let's suppose blue does decide to place their worker. They spend the 4 in this case, so 22 down to 18, and they place it on any round space on the board. Now we'll explain what all the spaces do. And then we keep going until all the pawns are drawn. Yellow. Let's say yellow decides to spend the 3. Now we're down to 2. Yellow again. Let's say yellow chooses to spend the 2. We're down to 1. And red chooses to spend the 1 to get something. Let's say go there. And now all the rest of the pawns are placed for free. We still finish with the pawns in the bag. Blue will place theirs for free. Let's say here. There's one more pawn in here. It's the last yellow one. Yellow places this for free. Let's say here. And now that all the pawns in the bag have been removed, now we return to the pawns that were passed. And all these ones will now be placed for free. So in this case, red would get to place. Maybe red goes here. It's still red's turn. Red can do something. Maybe red goes here. And then it's blue, and blue goes here. Now all the master builders have been placed, and now we resolve. Starting with number 1 events, and going around in sequential order up to number 14. The first thing that happens is we reveal the event. The ones with the seal are good events, but there are also bad events. So after this is revealed, then we go to number 2, the Archbishop's office. A player who placed their master builder here can make a choice. They can choose to ignore this event for themselves. It still affects everybody else, but they can choose to ignore the event or get a free resource from the market without having to pay the cost. Because some of them are negative, you may not want that negative event to affect you. And if it turns out to be positive, you still get some benefit in a free resource. So blue, let's say, oh, they like that. So they will have that event affect them, and instead they will take a free resource, in this case, a stone. Down to number 3, the wool mill. All the workers who are in this area, the laborers, will earn for their player 1 gold per. So in this case, yellow has 4 laborers left over. They all went to the wool mill. Yellow will gain 4 gold. Over to Kingsbridge, number 4. Each of these spaces corresponds to one of the 2 cards. Yellow gets this card. Likewise, red gets this benefit. You immediately receive 8 gold. 30 is the maximum. You can't have more gold than that. Kingsbridge Priory simply gives you victory points. A player who puts their pawn there gets 2 victory points. And a player who places a pawn there will get 1. Now we handle the resource distribution. For all the players who have laborers in the forest, so have these cards, they will get that many resource cubes. Do that for the forest, for the quarry, and for the gravel pit. Now we're at the King's Court, and here people pay taxes. You roll the die. It's 2 through 5. And that is how much every player who is not in the King's Court has to pay in gold. In this case, yellow is not in the King's Court, so yellow has to pay 2 gold in taxes, but red and blue do not. There's 4 spaces, so all 4 players in a 4-player game can go here, but there is an extra benefit to going into this space, is that player gets a free medal. coming up here, number 10, the shiring. It's another way to get craftsmen. In the first part of the round, while players are drafting these cards, they can pay the cost to buy these 2 craftsmen. These craftsmen you do not have to pay for. You simply claim them by placing your pawn on the matching space. And then at this point, you get to claim the craftsman and place it face up in front of you. Number 11, Shiring Castle. Any player who goes here takes 2 neutral workers for use in the next round. So whereas normally in a round a player will have 12 laborers, this player, for the next round only, will have 14. There's 4, so that at the start of the next round we can add 2 more for the next round. And then there is the market. Let's put some pawns in the market here. Let's say it looks something like this. We go in order 1 through 4. Each player can do a single transaction. A transaction is buy or sell any amount of a single resource. So starting with blue, blue can buy or sell as much sand or wood or stone that they want. You'll notice there's also a blue space for metal, but you cannot buy metal at the market. You can only sell it for 5 gold. Blue would do a transaction. Let's say blue decides to buy 2 sand. They would pay 4 because sand costs 2. They take these resources, and then it's red's turn to do a transaction. This resource market does not fill up until the new round. After red does a single transaction, blue would get to do another transaction, and then yellow would get to do a transaction, and then it goes back to here. It keeps repeating until all players have passed. Once a player passes, they're out. 13, the cathedral, is where players earn the bulk of their victory points. Players look at their craftsmen and the resources that they've collected and convert them into victory points. For example, with a mortar mixer, the player can convert 3 sand into a single victory point, but they can do that as many as 3 times in a single round. So if they had 9 sand, they could convert that into 3 points. At the end of this phase, you cannot have more than 5 cubes in hand. Any more, you'll have to throw away. And then the start player takes the wooden piece of the cathedral that they've been holding to indicate they're the start player, and places it on the foundation, like so. This shows that the first round is over. If a player went into number 14, change start player, then that player would then get the next wooden piece. But if nobody goes here, then the start player simply rotates clockwise. And whoever is the start player for the next round would take the next wooden piece and put it in front of them to indicate they're the start player. And now we reset everything. We take back all the master builders, put them back in the bag. Players take back all their laborers, place another metal here, refill the market. If a player went here in the last round and claimed the 2 gray neutral workers, you can take the other 2 and put them here for the next round. We're going to draw a new event, put it face down for now. 2 more privilege cards will go here. Any remaining craftsmen go away, but you have 4 new ones, in this case for round 2, 2 of which go down here, 2 of which go here. Try to be consistent in which ones you put down first, otherwise it's easy for people to think you're cheating. Take back all the resource cards, the laborer cards. Be sure to add the 2 back in that you didn't use in the previous round. Mix those up and draw a fresh 7 for the bottom there. Reset this black marker to the 7, and you're ready to start the second round, again starting with the drafting of these cards at the bottom of the board. After the 6th time of building the cathedral, so phase 13 of the 6th round, the cathedral will be fully built. Players can marvel at what they've built, but at any rate, the player with the most victory points will be the winner. One last thing is I want to mention the exceptions here, the tiny little rules regarding these starting craftsmen. Each one has an exclamation mark, which means that if you lose this card and you don't get a suitable replacement, you lose some small ability during the game. If you don't have a stone cutter, you are not allowed to sell stone at the market. If you don't have a woodworker, you are not allowed to buy wood at the market. Unless you have a mortar mixer, you cannot ever earn victory points with masons. That's it. You're ready to play the Pillars of the Earth. The biggest complaint people have about Pillars of the Earth is the random draw of master builders from the bag. Here you have a 90-minute, 120-minute game, which feels kind of strategic, but you have this random pull of workers in the worker placement sense from a bag. So you don't know when your turn's going to come. And actually, you kind of want your turns to be right in the middle. If your pawns come out too early, it's going to be really expensive to put that down. If it comes out too late, then you're going to have less options. So ideally, you want your pawns to come out kind of close to the middle, in between, where it's a little bit cheap, but there's still lots of choices available. And so it can be very frustrating for a player who gets, 2 of their 3 master builders coming out of the bag first. It's too expensive, 7 and 6, so they pass. But then they got to wait for everybody else to take all these great places before it comes back to them. Or the reverse, where all their pawns come out late and everything's free, but the places aren't that great. Randomness really gets a bad rap in this hobby, doesn't it? But do you want to play chess? Because chess is great. If you want to play chess, go ahead. Chess is there. And there are lots of perfect information abstract games if you want to play them. Perfect information non-abstract games. Just games in which you can just use that big giant brain of yours and not have to worry about dice rolls or card draws to mess you up. In this game, there are random pulls from the bag, and in a single round, it can feel really, really swingy. But you play 6 rounds. And you're not going to have that bad luck every single round, okay? With all those draws, all those pulls from the bag, you're going to have some lucky rounds, some unlucky rounds. How are you able to deal with bad luck? How do you make the best of a bad situation? What's happening to you is bad, and what's happening to the other players is not as bad. But if you can still pull out the win, isn't that satisfying? Isn't that exciting? It's like, man, I really had a bad third round, but I was able to come from behind and I was able to eke out the win, right? By a couple of points. That's amazing. The randomness is a challenge that you have to overcome. How do you react to that? When you have a bad round, what decisions do you make to make the best of a bad situation? These are important decisions, and the randomness of the tile pulls doesn't bother me at all. It bothers a lot of people. Now, when you look at something like Agricola, which of course was a huge hobby success, a regular game, the base game, a family game, I think they call it, there's almost no luck. In fact, there is, depending on how you use the words, I don't think there is any luck. There's just the randomness of when particular actions become available. And that just ends up being variety, right? To kind of change up the game from game to game. But if you look at the actual family edition of Agricola in the smaller Carcassonne size box, there's 0 randomness in that game. So if you want no randomness, yeah, go ahead and play that. But when you look at something like regular Agricola, the normal Agricola, where you draw cards, there's a huge amount of randomness in those card draws, right? It's luck whether I get a hand of cards that I can synergize, that I can combo off of each other. That's luck, but for some reason that doesn't bother people as much. Even if you're doing drafting, there is still some luck, some randomness in there, but it just doesn't seem to bother people. And then of course, then you have a game that followed Pillars of the Earth, like Stone Age. And that has a lot of luck because it's dice rolls. Those bad rolls do affect things, but they're not going to happen every round. You're going to notice when they happen, but you're probably not going to remember when they don't, when you had a normal round. And in the end, probably all the players will have some bad luck as well as some good luck. And it's how you capitalize on the opportunities that the good luck provides, and how you overcome the challenge of a bad luck round. But it bothers a lot of people. So you have to ask yourself if the random order that these pawns come out in, if that's going to bother you, maybe the game isn't going to be for you. Now, I do want to talk about the expansion, because the expansion does address that a little bit, and it also addresses the one flaw I do have that I can say about the game. It is still a pretty long game, but I'm engaged the whole time. The length doesn't bother me. Agricola is a long game too, and I enjoy playing that. No, the length of Pillars of the Earth doesn't bother me. The only thing that really bothers me about the game is in the base game, there's just a limited number of cards. So every round, 4 craftsmen come up. And it's always the same 4 craftsmen. There's 4 craftsmen for round 1. There's 4 craftsmen for round 2, and so on. The only variety in those cards is where they appear, because 2 of them will be able to be purchased at the beginning of the round, and 2 others will be able to be claimed by worker placement by your master builders in the later part of the round. So which craftsmen end up where is the only variety, but you'll always see the same craftsmen. And of course, the craftsmen get better round after round after round. It can be extremely important to know what those later cards will be like, because you know that in round 5, this craftsman is definitely going to come out. You don't know whether you're going to have to purchase it, whether you have even a chance to purchase it based on turn order, or whether it'll be, something you have to claim through worker placement, but it will be there. And if you want to, you can bet your entire strategy on getting this one craftsman. So even though it does give you some growth over multiple plays, you begin to learn the cards, it's not the kind of depth that I like in a game. This is the type of depth that puts starting players who have never played the game before, potentially at a really big disadvantage. So usually when I'm teaching Pillars of the Earth, I do like to kind of point out just some little things. It does sometimes backfire. So in the last game I played, it was new for one player, I think, and another player they just hadn't played in a long time because it's a little bit of an old game. And I told them, I said, metal is very good to get, and it's very hard to get. Some of the later craftsmen need metal, but you have very limited opportunities to get metal over the course of the previous rounds. And my friend took that to heart and really made it a big part of his strategy, without knowing the cards, to gather as much metal as possible in the early rounds. And then in the later rounds, yeah, there were craftsmen that required metal, but you couldn't use them that much anyway. There's a limit to how many times you can use a craftsman. And in the end, he kind of overcompensated. Not his fault, it's my fault, right? When you're trying to introduce a game, when you're trying to overcome this potential problem with the game, where it is very advantageous to know things that are going to happen later, that you know are going to happen later, then I feel a responsibility to give new players or inexperienced players a heads up about that. But I have to be careful with how much I emphasize that. If I emphasize it too much, players might get the impression that that's all important in the game. And then they fight tooth and nail for this thing, banking on something to happen later, and it happens, but it's not as as much as maybe I implied it would be, as much of a deal. So it's probably worthwhile, but it'll take some extra setup time just to lay out all the cards, all the round 6 craftsmen, all the round 5, all the round 4, just so everybody gets a sense of what's coming. Having the same craftsman come out every round can also mean that the game is a little bit samey. The base game can feel a little bit samey from game to game to game. Play it once in a while, brilliant. But if you play it multiple times over a short time, each game is going to kind of feel a little bit similar to the last. Another downside, which the expansion addresses. Another important thing to know about this game is it's a Goldilocks game. A Goldilocks game is a game that doesn't scale for different player counts. So if you have a 2 to 4 player game, The 2-player game might feel too loose, too easy to do what you need to, so there's no tension. 4 players, maybe it's too tense, it's too cutthroat, there's too much competition for limited actions. And 3 players is the sweet spot. When you look at something like Agricola has different boards that you fit in based on the different player counts. So fewer players, fewer action spots. Pillars of the Earth doesn't do that. So you have a static number of worker placement spots that's available every round. Because it doesn't scale very well, I actually don't prefer this game at 4 players. I believe on Board Game Geek it says that it's best at 4 players, and I strongly disagree with that. And I think there's a little bit of a feedback loop that has hurt this game's image. Because you have board game geeks who like a game with as much tension as possible. You want it tight and cutthroat, right? Like we talk about something like an El Grande, a 3, 4, 5 player game. I love El Grande at 4 players, but there are people who absolutely swear never play El Grande with fewer than 5 players. It becomes this kind of truism, a belief in the hobby, that only at the highest player counts do these games shine. And that belief took hold for Pillars of the Earth. It is the most cutthroat at 4 players, but it also makes the players more vulnerable to swings of luck. So what happens is on Board Game Geek, people see best at 4, and then people try it with 4, and then they don't like it. But they don't update the poll necessarily to say that, no, this isn't good at 4, let's try it at 3. No, oftentimes it'll just be dismissed as a bad game, or at least a game that's not for them. Give it a low rating and move it on. And it's sad. The game is fine, 2 players. I'm just not a big 2-player game fan. Love it at 3 players. And 4 players does have that challenge. Now, I do want to talk about the expansion. Very important to talk about this expansion. It's just the Pillars of the Earth expansion, because it does a number of very important things that drastically improve the game. The big thing for me is the expansion introduces more cards of everything. More event cards, more privilege cards, more craftsmen. And so instead of there being 4 craftsman cards per round, and you're just going to deal those out every time you play the game, now there's 6 and you deal 4 from that. So you're going to see different craftsmen in each game. So it just adds a lot of variety. And that's really important for the longevity of the game, because the base game will feel kind of samey after a couple of plays. And the expansion feels really, really necessary to add that variety, to make the game a fresh experience every time you play. The big thing about it, literally, is that it comes with an extra side board that you can add it for any number of player counts. I would recommend it only for 4 players and up, because as I said, the board is too tight for 4 players, in my opinion. So you add an extra board, which adds more worker placement spaces. They're fine, but now the game supports up to 6 players. 6 players will take a very long time to play, but that extra board is still welcome, even if you don't think you'll play it with more than 4. I would recommend the sideboard for a 4-player game. It just gives more options for your master builders. There is a variant now, which is part of the sideboard, where, and this is designed to address the luck of how the pawns come out from the bag every round. Instead of putting all 3 master builders in the bag per player, you just put in 2. You keep one of them out of the bag. You play normally, you draw a master builder, maybe they pass, gets placed on the board, draw another one. At some point, somebody's going to pay the cost and place their master builder. When they do that, they take their 3rd master builder, the one that wasn't in the bag, and they put it on a track. Every time somebody places a master builder for the first time, they add their pawn to the track. And then after all the master builders are placed, then the remaining master builders are placed for free, I'm pretty sure, in reverse order. So the first player to place their master builder, not the first player whose pawn was drawn, but the first player to place their pawn on the board is guaranteed to be the last player to place their pawn on the board. Easy variant, you can do that with the base game, no problem. So the expansion is great, and it fits into the base game box completely fine. A few years ago, Kosmos reprinted Pillars of the Earth. It's the same game. I think they reworded some things because the translation is different. I know the original translation, I think, was done by Alex Yeager from Mayfair. So I think they had a different translator do the English version now. So the names of things might be a little bit different. But anyway, it's the same great game. But they didn't reprint the expansion. And they certainly didn't print like a big box that includes the expansion. No, they did the typical, very reasonable publisher thing to do, which is print the base game and then see how well the base game does before they decide to print the expansion. Probably, on paper, a very reasonable decision from a business perspective. Yeah, look, if it was a new game, that would absolutely make sense. But this game has a little bit of history. People can read up about it. And they can read all the comments of people like mine, and I certainly am not the only one, who says this game is great with the expansion. Without the expansion, it's a harder game to try to sell people on. It does have potential problems. And the expansion is so great, and it basically just fixes everything. The expansion is fantastic. So, of course, a number of people, hobbyists, are going to read that and go, well, I'll buy the base game, but only if I can get the expansion too. And Kosmos is going, well, we're not going to print the expansion unless people buy the base game. So, of course, what's going to happen? The hobbyists aren't so much going to buy the base game because they don't know if the expansion will ever happen. So they hold off on the base game. And then Kosmos goes, well, looks like people aren't buying the base game. I guess it's a good thing we didn't print the expansion, huh? It's unfortunate. So this expansion would probably go for a pretty penny on the aftermarket. And it's really unfortunate because the game is very, very good. And with the expansion, it's great. But the expansion is hard to find. So unfortunately, it leaves Pillars of the Earth in a little bit of limbo. So you can go out and you can buy the base game, I think, pretty easily at the time of recording. But will you want to if you can't find the expansion? You want my opinion? If you're only going to play this game 2-player or 3-player, it's probably still worthwhile to at least look at the game, at least give it a try. I would personally avoid the base game 4 players. It's a bit long, and that 4th player is it's gonna be different every round, but one of the players every round is gonna be like, oh my god, I can't do anything. So for 2 or 3 players, it's still worthwhile. It's still a great game. It's just a little bit samey. The expansion makes it less samey from play to play, adds support for more players, and improves the game for 4 players. So the base game with expansion, if you can get them reasonably priced, is absolutely worth it. So if you see the expansion just kind of floating around out there, maybe somebody doesn't know what it's worth, they have it for sale and it's not that expensive, and you're interested at all in the game, just buy the expansion, just buy it. Then get the base game later when you want to. And then you'll have both. I think the expansion should work with both the old and the new versions of the English edition, because they're printed basically the same. Like I said, the wordings are different, but I think all the art and everything and the card size and stuff, I think that's all the same. Just suggesting the base game is a bit hard for me. But I still love it, especially as a 3-player game, but especially with the expansion. So, look, there's a lot of worker placement games out there. And if you love worker placement, honestly, if you never played Pillars of the Earth, you wouldn't know what you're missing. It's fine. Don't even worry about it. Pillars of the Earth is a great example of a worker placement game from before Agricola. What makes it great? There's a lot of variety in terms of the mechanisms, in terms of the general things you're trying to do. So there's variety in the resources. You're trying to get a few different resources. Of course, you're trying to get better craftsmen that will convert them to victory points. It is resource conversion, but it's pretty simple resource conversion. It's not like there's some games that convert this into that into victory points. And no, it's not like that. It's much more simple. And it's definitely a game where you make the best of a bad situation. You're not going to get everything you want. You're not going to get that perfect craftsman. You see the perfect privilege card that you can't get. There's an event that might be absolutely perfect for you, but you don't know what that event's going to be, right? Usually I don't like events in games, but I like the events in Pillars of the Earth because there's a mix of good events and bad events, and there's a worker placement spot that allows you to avoid any negative effects if you want to. And if it turns out to be a positive event, you still get a benefit from it. So then it becomes like, is it worthwhile? I don't know what that event is, but that's an extra pull of another option to place your worker, place your master builder. I guess I just like the variety of the different worker placement spaces, right? There's that one that allows you to avoid the negative effect of an event. There's the privileges. There's just straight up victory points. There's ones that give you extra laborers every round, or the next round anyway. Ones that allow you to avoid paying taxes, and if you're the first one there, you get a medal, which is pretty good. There's, you can place them in the market so you can buy and sell. So, and of course with the expansion, there's even more spaces. In terms of what you need to do, it's, on the face of it, relatively linear, right? Get resources, use your craftsmen, and get better craftsmen when possible. Get victory points. Seems pretty straightforward. But yet the board has so much variety in the types of things you can do by placing your master builders there. If you were to just take the master builders and just play clockwise, it would be pretty boring. It really would. Drawing the pawns from the bag adds a big amount of excitement, honestly, because you don't know, you see a great thing, but you don't know whether you're going to be able to get that. And your pawn comes out, but the cost now, the price is 5. So it's like, is it worth 5 gold? Mine, probably I think there are more of my master builders in there compared to other players. Maybe I should pass. Maybe the next one that comes out will also be my master builder. And so I can get that thing a little bit cheaper. But you're taking that risk, right? I do, as you know, have a soft spot for older games. And I always look at Pillars of the Earth as a product of its time, as a game with worker placement that came out before Agricola. You had some worker placement games, but worker placement wasn't really a thing. And then Caylus was a big thing in the hobby. And then you started to see other worker placement games. Maybe they start to kind of branch out, try some different things. And then with Agricola, then boom, you have another hit. And then worker placement is kind of locked into this path. So I think it's fascinating to see a different path for worker placement, a different way of doing it. And I can't separate Pillars of the Earth from the time it came out. I think it's an absolutely fantastic worker placement game from 2006. But there's so many worker placement games nowadays, you might think, well, do I need this game? I'll save you the time. No, you do not need this game. It's a long game. It's, in my opinion, not that great with 4 players. It's much improved with an expansion that's really hard to find and is expensive. So there's lots of reasons to convince you not to get Pillars of the Earth. Having said that, I have Pillars of the Earth, I have the expansion, and it's not going anywhere. I love it to this day. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like the Pillars of the Earth don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Though it would be nice if the expansion was reprinted. Anyway, take care.